and welcome to The Left Wing. Well, this is the week we've been waiting for, lads. Quarter-final week. It's been a long time coming, it feels.
Yes, it has been a long time coming. The South Africa game feels like weeks ago, really, doesn't it?
Another tournament ago.
Yeah, it really does. But we're back in Paris. Sorry, we're still in Paris. We haven't gone back to tour, I suppose, for the first time. So this is our new home. Not the most scenic spot, it must be said, for YouTube watchers who have been treated, to be fair.
I thought we were going to be joined by a pigeon there a second ago.
Yeah, like our locations in tour were pretty
Fabulous.
good, to be fair.
We had the space, and yeah, it was
it's nice to be in Paris all the same, though.
It is.
A Monday morning in
There's
Paris.
a different energy about
25
the place.
degrees. We are still in shorts and t-shirt. It's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, it does feel like a long time coming. I mean, like what Ireland did on Saturday was exactly kind of what they were expecting to do. I mean, there was no great shock that Ireland put Scotland to the sword, and now they look forward to the game that I think from a long way out they would have been planning for as well, because they would have backed themselves to finish top of the pool and would probably have expected France to beat New Zealand, which is how it's panned out. So I'd say loads of the homework has already been done. It's certainly not starting this morning or yesterday following the Scotland win, and yeah, it feels like a big week. Can't wait to get stuck into it.
Yeah, and we got a positive injury update as well this morning from Mick Carney.
Suspiciously positive.
Yes.
They would never tell Porkies.
Yeah.
James Ryan obviously will go and see a specialist on the hand injury he picked up, so we should know that by tomorrow. Matt Hansen and James Lowe, Mick said they're progressing well, and that Robbie Henshaw and Keith Earls are also in contention. Basically, no player has been ruled out and no player has been called up.
Well, I would be, at this stage, surprised if James Ryan makes it. I'd be surprised if James Ryan plays in the tournament again, based on the footage that I saw at the match and what I've heard on the grapevine. But at the same time, on Friday or Thursday, Andy Farrell essentially told us Robbie Henshaw's tournament was pretty over.
Yeah.
And then he was at the captain's run. So players are making very, very impressive returns from injury. I think of those, I would say Hansen and Lowe are the most likely to be involved at the weekend. I always thought Lowe, barring something actually structurally wrong with his eye, was going to play. That, once the swelling came down, it was an unfortunate incident.
Oh, it looks sore, didn't
It looked horrible. It really did.
But at the same time, it's the kind of thing a player can get over with, after a couple of days. Unpleasant, but not tournament ending. Hansen, obviously, soft tissue is soft tissue, but even it may have just been that he cramped up in the dressing room during that HIA. I suppose that's the danger of a HIA. You come out.
I had the very same thought, actually. Very same thought. Obviously, we don't know if that's what did happen, but I had the very same thought that is probably one of the dangers of the HIA when you're warmed up and you're going
how long
off
was
and
he
you're
on the pitch
stopping.
before he came off again?
Yeah, not long at all. And I actually looked back through it.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
I looked back through the game and I couldn't see any incident that suggested that he did pull up his calf. I mean, before we got the injury update from team manager Mick Carney this morning, I had texted you, Rod, to say that I had heard on the grapevine that James Lowe and Matt Hansen were both positive, was the word. Not in a COVID sense, but in an injury sense, that definitely the soundings were positive. And then that's obviously what we were told at the press conference as well. So it sounds great, but I would also share Rod's concerns for James Ryan.
Yeah.
We'll see tomorrow at training. That's kind of the next step on this, and we will. Ireland, I think if they get Lowe and Hansen into the team, look, Ryan is a huge loss, because even if he's wearing the number 19 jersey, the energy even that he brought, himself and Keller, I thought, came into the game and brought in a huge amount of energy and physicality, and that's a great weapon to have. And look, Joe McCarthy's a phenomenal prospect and a very good player. Ryan Baird has played big games in the second row for Ireland before he started the Grand Slam game. They see him more as a back row, but he can do a job there. And the All Blacks, while deeply physical, they're not going to, maybe don't require the same weight as South Africa. I still think Ryan is one of the top 3 locks and will be a significant loss to them.
Yeah.
And even if they do get Henshaw back, Henshaw in the 23 jersey, I know McCluskey did well, but I think Henshaw is an upgrade. I mean, he's the reason he's always been picked ahead of McCluskey over the years. So if you had them on the bench, it would be significant. I don't expect Ryan to get there.
So who would you have on the bench then?
Personally, Bear, because he has more experience. And look, I really like what I see with Joe McCarthy, but I haven't seen in enough big games to know for sure that he's going to perform in a World Cup quarter-final. Whereas Baird, I know, but he has made an impact in big games before. They were both on the tour, weren't they? Was McCarthy there as well? But neither of them played in any of the tests. But so, look, they really like what McCarthy and Andy Farrell gave him a big shout out in the press conference last Thursday. But
Big
Baird
young,
has been
big young Joe McCarthy.
Big young Joe. That's its official title. But I would go with Baird personally. And then there's a big question about if Ryan does end up going home, Do they call up a Cian Healy? Do they bring up a Kieran Treadwell? Or do they look for some extra support in the back line because they've got so many different issues? I mean that's another question for later in the week. But I mean, from where we were this morning and kind of the soundings, it's pretty good.
Yeah, there were shades of 2015, weren't there? You know, yesterday when you got that update as well, you're thinking the number, it just didn't sound good. But
yeah, it didn't. But like Ireland have no reason if one of those players like James Ryan, if they thought that he wasn't going to play again right now, then there's no reason for him not to rule him out and get someone over ASAP, you know what I mean? So they're obviously going to give him every opportunity. It makes sense that they would, but when you do watch back the game and you see the different clips of James Ryan, the most glaring of which was when he tried to pass. I mean, he just had no power at all. It was remarkable that he actually played on. I think they should have taken him off towards the end of the game to limit the damage, but Ryan was trying to prove a point, you know, to Andy Farrell. He clearly was playing through the pain. So yeah, like we'll have to wait and see. I think Keith Earls is an interesting one. Keith Earls was up for media today and he was very good. I'm going to be writing about this in tomorrow's Irish Independent, independent.ie. I mean, I think we were all probably a little bit surprised when we saw Keith Earls put up, but what a guy to set the tone for the week. He had some really interesting stuff to say. Won't go into it now because it's embargoed until tomorrow, but just about Joe Schmidt and his possible influence. And he just really, I thought, set a brilliant tone. So I wonder if Keith Earls had been fit, because clearly he wasn't fit to be on the bench last week. If he would have been the 23, I think it made perfect sense why McCloskey was. Farrell likes the big centre. We've talked about that at length on this podcast, but the fact Keith Earls was up today, like it has happened actually with Keith Earls in the tournament where, but usually when players are put up for media, they're involved. So it'll be a big call to make who plays 23, because it's going to take 23 players for Ireland to win their first ever World Cup quarter-final this weekend. But yeah, I just thought Keith Earls set a brilliant tone for the week ahead.
Yeah, and Mick Carney was also asked about Joe Schmidt. Mick would have worked with Joe through the years, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, it certainly adds another dimension to it. I've kind of maintained kind of very close relationship with Joe over the years, and while we haven't been texting over the last few days, I'm looking forward to catching up with him. He was an amazing coach for Ireland for the years that he was involved, and I think brought Ireland to a new level when he took over in 2013 and had some magnificent success, including a couple of wins against the All Blacks in Chicago and in Dublin. So, you know, there's a lot of, I suppose, talk about Joe knowing players inside out and whatever. But to me, I think all teams know each other so well that I don't necessarily think that that's any great advantage. I think we obviously know New Zealand well, having played them 3 times in the Test series last July. So, looking forward to it. And looking forward to catching up with Joe.
Joe, he's just a figure that looms so largely over this week, isn't he?
Yeah, it was always going to be a little bit of Joe Schmidt week. And I know Cian was in New Zealand last year, and it was a fairly big team in the way that he, you know, the COVID cases and the New Zealand management meant that he kind of got thrust back into the limelight all of a sudden. And he had initially, I mean, I remember the missive went out to all you guys. Don't bother asking for any interviews because he's not going to do them.
Yeah. We still haven't.
You didn't hear from him at all.
He hasn't been media at this tournament.
No, but I'm going to go to the All Blacks training / press conference tomorrow, so I might meet Joe for a coffee if he's on for. If you're listening, Joe, I doubt it.
But like he, you know, after that series, he became part of the All Black setup properly. I think he was going to be a selector, but you know, he became an assistant, and you could see. All you have to do is watch the warm-up on Saturday to see how influential he is with this All Blacks team. I mean, he is running it. It's very interesting to watch. And it's very obvious thing to do, but comparing Andy Farrell and Joe Schmidt when we did it with Mick Carney today, Andy Farrell in the warm-up on Saturday kind of sauntered from player to player, a little word here, a little word there. Schmidt is running the show. He's what age is he now? 50, 57, 58, Joe Schmidt. Hopefully I haven't said he's older than he is, but he is running with the young guys, driving them the way he used to do with Ireland. He is, it's his time. You know, he comes alive during the warm-up and training. He always said on pitch was where he wanted to be, whereas Andy Farrell is working his way from player to player. He's very much observing. He's letting it flow. He watches the opposition nearly as much as he watches Ireland warm up. It's a very interesting clash in styles. Joe Schmidt's fingerprints are all over what New Zealand do now. A lot of the improvements they've made since that series have his stamp on them, and he has a reason to be, if not fearful, more respectful of what the All Blacks will put together, because we know how good a coach he is and how well he prepares teams. Foster is the main man, but Joe Schmidt, I think, is the key brain behind the whole scene.
I think the time I saw Joe more animated than I've ever seen him in a warm-up game was at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff in 2019, last game of the Six Nations, the whole roof thing. Do you remember that time? The rain was coming down and he was out there warming up with the players, and I've never seen him. I felt exhausted watching him, and the players looked tired. By that stage, it seemed, even at that stage, the response just wasn't there. And so
I think sometimes, and I think that maybe this is less when he's the assistant and he's not controlling every aspect of it. I think that can sometimes, in a negative sense, infiltrate into the team's mindset and drain them of, if they're thinking about all the stuff that Joe is thinking about, because he is the hive for a team, that it can impact performance. And I think it did 4 years ago, and it probably did that week of the quarterfinal 8 years ago. But the fact that he is an assistant in this team, even though he's a very influential assistant, and Foster's out in the media, I do think that that potential for negativity, or that potential for his obsessive control to filter into the team, maybe is removed. So I don't know if it's going to be as big a factor as it was when he was the man,
the head coach.
with Ireland.
It reminds me a bit of Stuart Lancaster going into Leinster, when he just wanted to be kind of behind the scenes, but effectively the one kind of running the show on the pitch. And I think that's what Joe Schmidt has done basically since the New Zealand tour last year. And you've seen, like, the All Blacks players, how highly they speak of him. They speak just like the Irish players did. And like, sometimes when we talk about Joe Schmidt and Ireland, like, I'm very conscious of the fact that it did go wrong in the last year. But
you mentioned this the last night.
Yeah,
he said that he might not be happy with the way it all finished.
Of course he wouldn't be happy with the way it finished in terms of that last year. But there's been comments, I think from certain players and stuff, and which is, look, it didn't go well, but that doesn't mean, and to be fair, I don't think any of the players would ever mean it in that way, that suddenly the work that he did before that doesn't count. I mean, Joe Schmidt, like you asked Mick Carney-Rudd about this today. I mean, Joe Schmidt's fingerprints are still part of the Irish setup. I mean, just because Andy Farrell has moved away from certain areas, I mean, there are still, I would think, certain pillars that Joe Schmidt has instilled. He's been the one who's changed, I would say, helped remove the aura around the All Blacks from an Irish perspective, which is ironic now, given that what they're going to do, are hoping to do this weekend. So, like, history in the last couple of years hasn't been that kind, I would say, to Joe Schmidt, but I think that's unfair. I think Joe Schmidt was unbelievable for Irish rugby, for Leinster as well, changed the way people in Ireland thought about the game. I mean, changed the way, like, I remember when we went to press conferences, like, when he wasn't kind of trying to use up the time and rattling off the opposition team, he, like, at the start especially, used to get like little nuggets and stuff about the way he thought about the game, and it forced you kind of to maybe think about how you watch games and how you write about games and how you analyse games. So look, there's no doubt that he's going to be a massive figure this weekend, but on the flip side, I think the Ireland players and coaches are just going to try and, downplay the significance of Joe this week, which all comes from Andy Farrell and how he doesn't allow others to get inside the players' heads. You've heard Simon Easterby yesterday said he's not going to be texting Joe Schmidt this week. Mick Carney, who is still very good friends with Joe Schmidt, is not going to be texting him. I think I mentioned this in the post-match pod on Saturday. Was it before the first test, I think, last summer? Andy Farrell and the coaches met Joe Schmidt during the week for coffee. But now Joe's role is so much bigger than what it was. He was a selector, like Rudd said back then, but now it feels like he has much more of a say.
Probably the difference between a World Cup and a series
sure.
as well, and there will be a residual fondness for Joe amongst those people, because I think they all respect him. I think, like any relation, not any relation, but like a lot of relationships, I think it just went sour at the end. I think they just all got sick of each other a little bit, and maybe Schmidt held on that year too long. I think the fact that the succession plan was in place didn't work in his favour. I think the fact that everyone knew Andy Farrell was taking over meant that a lot of people gravitated towards Andy Farrell. The players started trying to impress Andy Farrell, and I don't think that was on Andy Farrell himself. That was just the way things work, and I think that is a lesson for the IRFU going down the track. But also what you have in Andy Farrell is a deeply intelligent and emotionally intelligent man who's lived his entire life in professional sport, who watched everything, who contributed but was also watching and learning, having spent time with Warren Gatlin, having spent time with Eddie Jones, having spent time with a myriad of great rugby league coaches as well. He used to meet Steve Hansen for a coffee whenever they played against New Zealand. He was just a sponge. As he watched Joe Schmidt, he said, I'm going to take this and this. But you know what you're doing here? I don't like that. I'm going to change that. And what we keep hearing from the team in the aftermath of the Joe Schmidt era and in the Andy Farrell era is that the environment is better, and Mick Kearney doubled down on that today, that it's a much more relaxed place, a much more fun place to be.
Yeah.
You know, he brought the families in. I think that was a big step. It's nothing to do with rugby, but it makes the players happier, it makes them more comfortable and relaxed. There's a flight leaving Dublin on Saturday.
And there's a sense of downtime as well, you know.
Yeah, and that was partly like Joe Schmidt never had the Blanchardstown HBC to work with. They had to do everything at Carton House, but Joe, I think, would, if he saw a gap in the day, he'd put a meeting into it, whereas Andy Farrell goes, right, we're finished at this point. You don't see me and I don't see you. We'll see you tomorrow. And that's important. But he's also revolutionised the way Ireland play, building on what Joe put in place, but also a much more, there's a huge structure behind it, but there's also a freedom and a fearlessness about the way they play. And I always felt that, you know, the players under Joe had their Monday morning review in their backs of their heads. And the Leinster players who he had, Shane Horgan repeatedly said this, he never felt that. But with Ireland, I think either he became tighter because he had less window to work with, or the players just weren't as talented as that initial Leinster player team that he had, or he didn't trust them as much. But certainly, I don't think the New Zealanders have Joe Schmidt's voice and the Monday morning review in their heads as they play the game plan. So they are probably a more talented bunch. Maybe not as, like, I think there are limitations to this New Zealand team, but like if you look at Will Jordan, Bowden Barrett, Ardie Savay, you've got some of the most talented players in the world working under an incredibly brilliant coach, a brilliant rugby mind, and maybe without that fear of the review in their heads. It's a very potent combination.
Yeah, I'm sure it was something we used to always say. Imagine the day when he was at his peak with Ireland. Imagine the day when Joe Schmidt gets his hands on the All Blacks.
Yeah, and he probably hasn't got his hands on them in the way that he probably one day had hoped, because he's not the main man. But maybe, like I said earlier, hindsight, that it might suit him more. But Andy Farrell, just to go, like, to touch on Rudd's point there, like Andy Farrell taking over from Joe Schmidt, that was always the beauty, and that is what I felt, because I remember at the time lots of people thought, because it had went so horribly wrong in Japan and also throughout 2019, a lot of supporters were worried that it was going to be a continuation of the same thing, that this is basically the same management team without Joe Schmidt. And then obviously in time then O'Connell came in, which was huge and arguably the turning point of the whole thing. But Farrell had a front row seat to see, like, as exactly like Rudd said, what did work and what didn't work. And he didn't come in and just rip up the entire script. Like, that would be foolish to think that, for anyone to think that that was the case. But there's no doubt that he came in and put his own stamp, and just like Rudd said, like, I like this, I don't like that. I think getting the families in has been massive. You heard Mick Kearney talking about it there, and we've seen that across the course of the last few weeks. I mean, the families have been over regularly, particularly in that down week, and you get to see, like, I mean, I mentioned about that night we bumped into Johnny Sexton and Keith Earls with their kids, and they're just normal guys walking around, you know, trying to keep control of their kids in a busy square in Tour, you know. So I think the idea of, if they were away and they weren't able to kind of be a dad and be a husband and all those kind of things, I don't know, it kind of just probably heightens the pressure, and then they're allowed to come back down and be just normal people again before it ramps up. So it seems like the balance has been spot on. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, this weekend, like, everything that they've done over the last couple of years under Farrell, winning in New Zealand, winning the Grand Slam, clean sweep in the pool this year, to get that first spot, to avoid playing France in the quarter-final, which is huge, because I think it means that there's going to be a way bigger Irish crowd than there would have been if Ireland had played France in the quarter-final. Everything that they've done, 17 games in a row, has been about breaking the quarter-final glass ceiling and beyond. Because make no mistake about it, if, and we obviously all hope, Ireland do create that bit of history this weekend, that, like, they're not going to stop there. Like, they're not here to the World Cup just to kind of prove a point and get to the semi-final for the first time.
It's the benefit of a terrible draw, isn't it? Like, it's given us these box office quarterfinals, which really should be semi-finals. Like, I think the top four, I think what we've seen over the weekend with Scotland and Italy losing heavily twice, that the top four are so far ahead of everyone else. And obviously you can get caught in a semi-final, you know, whether it's New Zealand or Ireland against Wales or Argentina, or England and Fiji against South Africa or France. There is a chance over 80 minutes or 100 odd minutes that you could get caught, but you know, the quality of the four teams at the top is so far and above, and I still think that the top three are better than New Zealand. I think New Zealand are kind of on their own in the middle, but have the capacity to knock anyone off on their day. But I thought Luku looked really good alongside Jalabert. I thought that Bordeaux combination was really excellent. Again, look, it was against Italy behind a very dominant pack, and that's going to be very different at the weekend, and I'm not advocating you drop Dupont, but if they've any doubt, a guy that I hadn't hugely rated before, the fact that established combination is there gives them comfort, even if Dupont can only go 50 minutes because he hasn't played. Like, I thought he just looked really comfortable, and I thought he made Jalabert look good as well, which was a really, like, the depth that France have I mean, a guy that I didn't have a huge amount of time for, Luku, because I only ever see him for 5 minutes at the end of games. He looked a lot better than I realised, and as I say, the comfort that him and Jalabert had with each other was really positive for them.
You've come up with our great debate topic. So for tomorrow, Rudd thinks Luku should start the World Cup quarterfinal against South Africa, and I think DuPont.
I have a feeling our editors are going to want something in Ireland, New Zealand, so we have to come up with something better than that, Cian, I think.
They have done really well, but like it's also caveated by the fact that Italy were absolutely hopeless. So this is.
And I think that
different.
like reading anything into that, like everyone, I think when people saw New Zealand and France put whatever scores they did on Italy, there was a lot of go. I don't know who want to play in it. Like those wins were like that word facile. Like they were worthless, really. Like they were good for confidence and stuff like that, but it's not a real test. I think even Scotland were a lot better than like Scotland threw. I heard someone describe Ireland's win over Scotland as facile. Like Scotland threw an awful lot of punches at Ireland. They just couldn't knock them off their stride at all. It was a show of strength. And New Zealand and France both did what they had to do and were impressive in their own right. But I do think Scotland are a better team than Italy, and Ireland will be. Will have that battle hardened thing going into this game. Whereas, if you were flip the thing that I was writing about this morning, it's like, well, New Zealand haven't been tested in a couple of weeks, and the one time they were tested, twice they were tested in the last warm up and in the first game, and they couldn't find an answer to the
hammered in the warm up against South Africa, like absolutely. Yeah,
just off the plane, and with the lads who hadn't played for a couple of weeks. I would have caveats with that one, but France was they threw a lot of France and couldn't sustain it over the course of the 80 minutes.
As the Parisian boy racers spinning past.
Souped up, it's like got faster stripes on it.
But even those two defeats, and I know it's over a year ago now, and they would say that they've improved as a team. But like last summer's tour is massively important. Can you imagine if Ireland had been whitewashed down there, or even had lost the series 2-1 after levelling it up 1-1, and Ireland would definitely say that they're a better team as well.
And the 2020 game or 2021 game, like that was, we talked to Ronan Kelleher this morning. Like he was part of it. He scored the first try that day, if I remember correctly. They battered them that day. They absolutely overpowered them. And this isn't in New Zealand. It's on neutral ground. It's closer to home. It's going to have a big Irish support behind it. Like, I think Ireland are the better team if they get the bodies on the pitch that we expect them to get on the pitch. Ryan being a big loss, but look, if New Zealand have lost Tyrell Lomax, he might not be as big a name back in Ireland, but he's one of the people that they brought in post-tour, post that series, to fix what New Zealand were doing. They lose him, they're back to Nepo Lalala, who struggled against Ireland. I still don't think, like, Ethan de Groot's held together by tape, his knees all strapped up. He's been a big player for them in the front row, but again, is he at 100%? Can Ireland exploit that front row in the way they did a year ago? New Zealand would have learned from that tour, but Ireland would have learned an awful lot too. So it's so well set up, and I know we've got lots to dig into as the week goes on, but like they've got their own issues, New Zealand. Like they're not confident going into this game either.
The front row thing is fascinating because did you ever think, like, you'd be thinking that could be an area where Ireland could have an edge over an All Blacks team? And the fact that Ireland were able to get their front row off so early last weekend is absolutely huge. I saw a few people were asking me, was there any update on Tadhg Furlong's injury? I didn't see him.
He got treatment, but he was fine.
He was fine, and certainly
the word I got yesterday was James Ryan is serious, but Tadhg Furlong's absolutely fine. So that's.
I think Furlong coming off though was part of the Irish bomb squad coming on together. I was asking Finlay Bealham actually about it afterwards in the mix zone, if they had a name, and you'll never guess who's in charge of coming up with. Well, if they do, of course, Dave Kilcoyne, is in charge. So no, I don't think they'll be branding themselves or anything. But that was a serious flex, and it was a show of power against Scotland. But it was also hugely important that Ireland got that front row off so early, because they are going to be massively important against the All Blacks this weekend.
So Ireland team named on Thursday, we think.
We think. We're still waiting on a media schedule. Monday afternoon, and no sign yet.
There's been some whispers. We'll have to wait and see. This could be out of date because we could get the media schedule before people listen to this. But there's been some whispers that possibly they might look to name it on Wednesday, which would be interesting. But we'll definitely wait and see. New Zealand on Thursday. I'm going to go to the All Blacks tomorrow. Like, I'm usually the one who gets to go to the other teams when we're at World Cups, but because we were in tour and so far away from everyone else, I haven't had the chance. Are you looking
forward to getting away from us, Cian?
No, I'm not looking forward to getting away from you, but like, it is nice, isn't it? Getting into, and Sinead, you know as well, like dipping into the opposition at the week of a huge game, just to get a little sense of it. We haven't been able to do that so far for the South Africa game or the Scotland game, so it'll just be interesting to gauge the mood.
And we don't expect to hear from Joe Schmidt. No,
I don't know, Joe. Like, I'll buy him a coffee, like if you'd have a chat off the record if he wants. But Joe, if you're listening, I'm available.
Come here, before we go, just a reminder again about the Left Wing live show, the 3 Olympia Theatre on Thursday the 19th of October with Luke Fitzgerald, Bernard Jackman and Stephen Ferris, looking ahead to the World Cup. Cup semi-finals. And for more, go to ticketmaster.ie. Right, I think that's it from us, lads.
Yeah, we got through plenty there, and we've got a whole week to go.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
It's a big one, isn't it? Like,
Bring
it
it
just
on.
feels like this week
Oh,
feels so big. I mean, the World Cup's been
different.
brilliant. Paris has gone back to normal. The Irish fans have disappeared. I've already got ticket requests coming out my ears, and if anyone's listening, I don't get tickets. It's not. It's not. I barely get one for myself. But like the atmosphere, the build it's got all week is going to be brilliant. There's so many talking points. It's the biggest game in Irish rugby history, especially if they win it. I mean, if they can equal that record and win 18 in a row for Irish rugby, from Ireland to do that on the day that they qualify for a semi-final. What an amazing
And we want
achievement.
to have at least 2 more weeks of the Left Wing podcast daily, at least.
Absolutely do. Well, Will and Luke will also be back tomorrow with the Left Wing, so keep an eye out on your streams for that.